The extent to which a belief in universal salvation was held and taught in the early centuries of the Christian church has often been underestimated. That is an understatement. What is up, fam? Here we are, getting started in our new playlist entitled A Case for Christian Universalism. I'm going to be going through whatever it is I feel like going through to drop my case for Christian Universalism like it's hot, so y'all can see it. I'm not a scholar. I am not an academic. I am a regular individual who had, a Pauline, or may I say Paul-esque experience. I was on a high horse, and I was smacked off of it. I'm going to leave it at that. I am now a convinced Christian Universalist, and it is no fault of my own. It's been a rough ride. It's been a pile of years now. And I'm going to be going through what I need to go through to get you informed, at least the tip of the iceberg, for you to stand firm on this journey as the Lord guides you through the chaos of going from churchianity to reality. We'll call it that. All right, let's jump right in. So I'm going to start off by acknowledging a few of my favorite books. I don't have them all with me, but I have some good ones. If you are just dipping your toes in the water in this Christian Universalism camp, idea, concept, whatever. If it's new to you, in whatever context it's new, these books, some of which are available on Audible if you like listening. This one is by Ilaria Ramelli. She is an academic. She is a scholar. She is world-renowned in academia. The book is entitled A Larger Hope: Universal Salvation from Christian Beginnings to Julian of Norwich. This fine lass also wrote, The Christian Doctrine of Apocatastasis. I think it's like $350 for that book on Amazon. It is a monster of a book. And it's, you talk, so this whole universal salvation thing, this is not some new woo-woo, new age, woke, thing that just popped up over the last few years. It's been around since the beginning. And not only has it been around since the beginning, it's been battling against being snuffed out since Rome came in and reformed Christianity in a few hundred years after Christ walked the earth. So, a little bit about Ilaria Ramelli. I'm going to just read through the foreword to her book, A Larger Hope, to give you a little bit of an idea. I highly recommend this book. I have a small pile of other books we will be getting to in this video that I also highly recommend. This should be at the top of the list. If you are somewhat of an academic and you're looking at this from a more scholarly perspective, not so much a spiritual perspective or a layman's or logical perspective, but doctrinally, theologically, start here, please. The extent to which a belief in universal salvation was held and taught in the early centuries of the Christian church has often been underestimated. As Professor Romelli shows, this belief did not originate with Origen of Alexandria, the best-known patristic proponent of it, but most of those who subsequently held it were influenced by Origen and the particular shape that he gave to this hope of the final restoration of all things, all of God's rational creatures, including the importance of free will, which God will not suppress, and the purifying and restorative character of post-mortem punishment. Professor Romelli shows that this hope cannot be dismissed as no more than an intrusion into the Christian tradition from Platonic philosophy. These theologians, rooted in their teaching in exegesis of Scripture, and embraced Christocentric vision of the universe and God's purpose for it. Here we are, taken on an enlightening tour of the relevant writings of the major figures and also some of the minor figures. Some are well known, some are very little known, some are surprising. Romelli is thoroughly acquainted with all of the texts, and the relevant secondary literature. A very valuable feature is the extensive quotations from all the writers in question. Given her own translations, moreover, Professor Romelli provides for us, in each case, with a full profile of the various factors that contribute to each writer's understanding of the doctrine of universal salvation, restoration. Given the extent and diversity of the literature, this is a major achievement and a unique one, too. For anyone with an interest in this important subject will be heartily grateful. At a time when the popularity of belief in universal salvation seems to be increasing, this book will be an important resource both for learning about the form that belief actually took in a major theological tradition of the early centuries, for engaging with the arguments of the key theologians who taught it. Richard Bauckham, Professor of New Testament Studies, University of St. Andrews, Senior Scholar, Ridley Hall, Cambridge. This is a scholarly work. A Larger Hope, Ilaria Romelli. There's actually a follow-up to this. It's a Larger Hope Part 2. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's by Robin Perry. This one is Universal Salvation from Christian Beginnings to Julian of Norwich. The next book in line is, from Julian of Norwich to now, to today. So it's a large book. Like, Christian Universalism is a thing. It's just being suppressed and has been suppressed ever since Justinian, Tertullian, Augustine. Politics and greed. Politics and greed. Politics and greed. And money. Well, it goes hand in hand with greed. We're starting out with the scholarly works. David Bentley Hart is an Eastern Orthodox scholar of religion and a philosopher, writer, and cultural commentator. He's a fellow at Notre Dame for advanced study and has held a position at the University of Virginia, Duke University, Providence College, and St. Louis University. The guy translated the Bible. He is a genius. The guy is literally a genius. I'm not a big fan of his personality, but that's because he knows he's as smart as he is. That's all I got to say about that. But he knows not only Koine Greek, which is the language that the original texts were written in. He is fluent in the language. He was classically trained. He is a genius. He spoke like 7 languages by the time he was fluently by the time he was 3 years old. The guy's ridiculous. He also speaks poor Greek. You know what poor Greek is? I don't know if that's the official name for it. But that's, like, people didn't speak Koine Greek, the written language of the writings, or the written language of the archives and the stories and whatever was written, whatever the scribes wrote in back then. Poor Greek was what was spoken. It was interesting back then. Like today, you have your English language. You speak and you write, it's the same thing. Back, in the culture in which the scriptures were written, at least the New Testament Greek scriptures, they were written in one language, and then they had kind of an Ebonics version of the language that they spoke in. And with that comes a lot of transliteration and context transition that happens. So if somebody who is of the mother tongue of Koine Greek / poor Greek, they're going to get it. They're going to get the metaphors and allegories and the all the nuances of the language. We're not going to get it. Anyway, so this guy gets it. He translated the Bible. This is a literal translation. It's not a paraphrase. Check it out. It's pretty cool. By the way, I'm not getting paid by any of these guys. I don't even get paid from YouTube. I don't have ads. If you see an ad running on my channel, I'm not getting a dime for it. You're just paying for ads because you're not paying for YouTube Premium. I don't get paid for that. So, just so you know, this is all pro bono what I'm doing here for you. Just an FYI. So, if you do want to help me out, drop a comment, drop a subscribe, drop a like, hit the bell so you know when my next video comes out. On to the next one. Well, I had one there. This one's tied for number 1, honestly, for me. There's a lot of books that are really tied for number 1. If you're really, if you're kind of at the beginning, like, you kind of whiff of Christian universalism, but you're evangelical or you're typical hell-believing Christian. Depends. It depends. This one is a little bit more boring, a little bit more, I don't want to necessarily say scholarly, because it's not an academic book. The guy's an academic, he's scholarly. But it's just kind of more, it reads more like a textbook with, not even quite, but, it's more like a court case for Christian universalism. It basically breaks down Calvinism / Augustinianism, Arminianism, and universalism. And it essentially uses logic to come to the conclusion that Christian universalism is clearly, by far and away, what the Bible is portraying as the gospel. I do have a video where I read a chapter in this book referring to... Actually, I got a few videos on this channel reading chapters out of this book. I highly recommend you buy this book, by the way. Like, just buy it. But, you could get... Kindle, Audible. I don't actually think this book's on Audible. It's one of the few books that is an audiobook, but it's not an Audible. You can get online. That was a couple years ago. It may be on Audible now. The Inescapable Love of God by Thomas Talbot. I actually bought this one as an MP3 off some other website for like $3. So, and it was absolutely worth it because I don't have a lot of time to read. I'll throw my headphones on while I go to work. And I'll tell you what, I'm not exaggerating when I say I've listened to the audio version of this book probably 30 times. Maybe more. That's an underestimation. And I keep going back to it, and I've had it for years. And I'll actually sit down and read it when I have time. Like when I read it to the camera. And then we have books like this one. This is Heaven's Doors by George W. Saris. George W. Saris is a narrator for Audible. I don't know how many books he's narrated for Audible, but he's narrated a lot of them. He wrote this book, and it's not a scholarly work. It is not a boring book. This is one of those books for your typical everyday person. And it reads more like a novel. It's not a novel. It's not a story. But it's a much easier read. And it's a much more... You're not going to want to put it down when you're starting to read it. This is... well, if you are honestly like just getting your toes wet in Christian Universalism, you just discovered it and you've always kind of felt like that was the real thing, but you need something to kind of back you up in your feeling, like something to kind of reassure you you're on the right track. Just pick up this book, Heaven's Doors by George W. Saris. I actually think I should read a little bit out of this one, just for the sake of this video, while we're getting started here in episode 1 of A Case for Christian Universalism. Obviously you have a preface, but then you get into chapter 1. It's called How Much Are You Worth? Chapter 2, what are we talking about anyway? Chapter 3, where did endless punishment come from? Chapter 4, what did the early church teach? Chapter 5, what do the ancient creeds tell us? Chapter 6, what happened in the Middle Ages? Chapter 7, what happened from then to now? Chapter 8, what does the Bible really say? Sheol and Hades. Chapter 9, what does the Bible really say? Gehenna and Tartarus. Chapter 10, how long is quote-unquote forever anyway? Ion, Olam, and Kalesis. Chapter 11, what are God's judgments all about? Chapter 12, but what about ... Chapter 13, how wide are heaven's doors really? And then you have a final word and notes and acknowledgments. I think I'm going to read the preface of this book, which is like, 3 pages. I'm not going to bore you to death, but because like I said, you can buy these books on Amazon. You can get them to your door the next day, depending on where you're located. You might be able to get it same day, or you can just get it on Kindle. It's easy as that, or Audible. Like, this is on Audible. Honestly, on Audible, I have probably 40 to 50 books that are all Christian Universalist and the like. And they're not all one flavor. I mean, I have them from Eastern Orthodox to Catholic to laymen to certain Protestants who've converted to Eastern Orthodox and to, just all kinds of flavors. But anyway, moving on. We'll just jump right in. I'll read this preface and we'll see what I'm thinking when I'm done with this. What will happen to me and the people I love after we die? Common question. At some point in nearly every person's life throughout history, people have wanted to know the answer to this question. For the first 500 years after Christ, most Christians believed that God would ultimately redeem all of his creation. They believed Jesus Christ succeeded in his mission to seek and save the lost. The greatest story ever told was the greatest story that could ever be told. The answer to the question, you and all those you love will ultimately be in heaven. Then, for at least 1,500 years, most of Christendom has been told that the majority of the billions of people who have lived on this earth will remain separated from the love and mercy of God for all eternity. Crap. Hogwash. Garbage. Baloney. The moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and sons and daughters and relatives and friends who have not exhibited the right kind of faith here in this life will be shut up in a place called hell to suffer forever and fry in their own fat. But is that really true? Will more people suffer in hell eternally than live in heaven? Like, does the devil actually win and get a higher score than God? Like most Baptist churches are going to tell you? Is the greatest story ever told the story of creation, fall of redemption of mankind, really a tragedy for the vast majority of people who have ever lived, including many who you know and love? Will most of the people God created in His image never walk through heaven's doors? No. That is a myth that was forced upon the Christian church by a power-hungry Roman emperor. It was supported by a highly respected, misinformed cleric. It has endured for centuries because it became the status quo. And it's time to expose that myth. It wasn't always this way. During the first 5 centuries after Christ, many of the most prominent Christian leaders believed that hell was real, but it had a positive purpose. Purgatory? We have a word for that. And it didn't last forever. I actually don't subscribe to purgatory, FYI. I'll get into that later on or in another episode. Even though the early Christians actually did believe in it, I'll explain that later. Those early Christians include the man who wrote the first system of Christian theology. He's considered by many to be the most important theologian and Bible scholar of the early Greek church, the man named Origen. Another man of great influence was Gregory of Nyssa, who was instrumental in defining the Christian doctrine of the Trinity that we still confess today. Gregory added the phrase, "I believe in the life of the world to come," to the Nicene Creed, and was acknowledged in later centuries until this day by most churches as Father of Fathers. You know, like early church fathers, those who canonized the Bible and, helped establish Christianity as a formalized religion. The church fathers, this guy was like the father of fathers. He was the main man around, the 4th or 5th century. They and others believed that God didn't defeat evil by shutting it up in a corner of His creation and leaving it there forever, like some kind of cosmic graveyard, keeping sinners imprisoned for eternity. Instead, they were convinced that God will destroy evil by transforming the hearts of evildoers, ultimately making them into those who love goodness. It was their understanding that at the end of time, God would actually get everyone He created into heaven. Then in the 6th century, the belief in hell as a place of never-ending conscious torment was forced on the church by the politically motivated Roman Emperor Justinian I. He has often been called the last Roman because of his zeal to revive the empire's greatest and his declaration. Because of his zeal to revive the empire's greatness and his declaration that the emperor's will is law. He was supported by the writings of one of the most revered and loved of all theologians, the man known as Saint Augustine. Unlike Origen, Gregory, and others before him who read the New Testament in their native language, Augustine was unable to read Greek. He therefore based his belief in endless punishment on an incorrect Latin translation of the text instead of the original language, and he admits it in his own writings. But somehow we still have it today. Just want to shake people that believe in hell. Like, you freaking idiot. Seek out the history of that which you claim to believe. My gosh. But there's so much cover up and so much, it's just so thick that, I don't blame you. I believed it forever. The centuries that followed the belief that hell was punishment that would never end provide a justification for those in the religious establishment to persecute and even torture any and all who would disagree with their views. Yeah, if you believe in hell, you actually have theological justification for killing somebody who is non-Christian. Actually, you have theological justification for killing a guy like me, because you think that what I'm doing is worse than actual physical murder. You think I'm murdering men's souls, putting them in hell forever. What's worse, murdering somebody who's going to end up in heaven, or murdering somebody's soul and talking them out of what you think would get them to heaven and end up putting them in eternal hellfire? You know, that's why, like, the Reformers and many other Christians justified murder of dissenters and people that just simply disagreed with them on superficial points of theology. It's freaking stupid. Here we go. Back to the book. I gotta stop talking. I'm getting riled up here. Some had sincere but misguided motives. Others sought power, position, and wealth. For the past 1,500 years, most of Christendom has been told that history ultimately ends tragically. Many are saved, but most are lost, and the devil ultimately does win. God gets a tiny little piece of his people. But that's a victory. That's victory. The cross was so victorious. He saves 3 people. Why has the myth persisted? One of the most common responses I get when I tell this to people is, why have I never heard this before? I'd certainly like to believe that what you're saying is true, but I can't believe that you would be the only person in 1,500 or 2,000 years to have believed this. First of all, I'm not the only person in the last 1,500 years to discover this. The Eastern Church, a church of over 350 million members, today has never lost sight of this truth. In the Western Church, there have been many individuals and groups throughout church history who have been convinced that God will ultimately restore all. Do you understand that in America, over 65% of Christians don't believe in hell? Yeah, that's a recent poll that was taken. I understand that the vast majority of Christians in America are not practicing, but I wonder why they're not practicing. Because they don't want to believe your BS? Maybe it's time to step out of the cult. Stop drinking the Kool-Aid and start actually learning the history and the roots of... Okay, I got it. I'm done. Sorry. Backing off. I know my viewers are not the ones I'm arguing with because y'all are cool. You're here because we agree, right? William Law, a clergyman who influenced John Wesley in the evangelical revival in the 18th century in England, believed it. And so did Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence and co-founder of the Philadelphia Bible Society. Their voices and those of many over time spoke the message, but they were drowned out by louder voices. The truth was never lost, it was only hidden. Second, the reason why most people had never heard this is really quite simple. Intimidation led to fear, which resulted in ignorance in future generations. I gotta hurry up because this camera likes to overheat. When influential church authorities declared that hell was never-ending misery for those who didn't follow their teaching, many began to believe what they were told. Once that declaration was accomplished by action, persecution and torture in the days of the Inquisition, and the great threat of excommunication or ostracism in later times, people became very wary of challenging what the authorities said. As fewer and fewer questioned tradition, people began to assume it was true. They either ignored or were unaware of views that disagreed with what they've been told. That intimidation and fear continued to exist in our world today. When I began writing this book, I knew my beliefs would be controversial, even though they raised They're based on extensive historical and biblical research that's been endorsed by world-renowned scholars. A couple of those I mentioned. What I didn't know was that I would lose dear friends. I would lose business colleagues that I'd worked with for years. I would lose my job with a Christian ministry I had worked with for almost 10 years. And my family and I would lose our church that we'd have been active members in for 20 years. All because people found out I was writing a book about God's love for all mankind. If you're kicking a person out for writing a book about God's love, Mr. Pastor, you're a freaking cult leader. You're not a Christian. So as I was saying, when my camera overheated, ironic timing, you're a freaking cult leader, Mr. Pastor, if you're kicking people out of your church for preaching God's love. Or for simply not even rocking the apple cart, but just on their own personal time, writing a book about how God loves the world. Like, dude, read John 3:16. So, funny story. I'm like, you're a freaking cult leader. And then the camera died. Overheated. I literally pulled the camera off the tripod and went and threw it in the freezer for like 10 minutes. Cooled it down. Brought it back in here, and yes, the lens steamed up. So I'm sitting here waiting for it to acclimate. So here I am, back at it. I contemplated not finishing off this chapter, which is just the introduction, or preface I should say. But I'm going to finish it, to finish off the video. It's not going to be that long of a video. But, let's just finish it off. A pastor friend of mine made the mistake of letting officials in his denomination know of his belief that God will ultimately reconcile all of creation to himself. He was tried, found guilty, and defrocked. Another friend who holds a leadership position in his denomination recently told me he thought he'd look into the issue when he retires in a few years, after he no longer has to worry about stepping down from his position. I've had numerous email interactions with a person who believes strongly that God would ultimately restore all. To this day, he has never told me his name or where he lives because he's afraid people in his church might learn of it, and he and his family would have to leave. People are very hesitant to question the traditional belief that's been handed down to them, even though they may feel uncomfortable with that belief. I got something to say on that. I'll get to that here in a minute. It's not that they've rejected a biblical argument for ultimate restoration. They've never heard it. What do you believe? The God who created the world is all-powerful. He's all-wise, he's all-loving, and is the creator. And this creator has specifically said he wants all people to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. So why should it be hard to believe that God will actually accomplish what he said he desires to do? Jesus Christ did not fail in his mission to seek and save that what was lost. He's the Savior of the world, not just the Savior of a small part of the world. Have you ever wondered where you and those you love will go when you die? Read the book and ask yourself, what you think. Heaven's doors really may be wider than you ever believed. So, what was I going to say a second ago? Remember Rob Bell? The guy who was a megachurch pastor. He was pretty controversial at one point a few years ago. He's kind of fallen off the radar now, but in his book, Love Wins, or maybe it's one of his books following that, he talks about how as a megachurch pastor, he's in this like inner circle with other big church pastors or church leaders. Like, I mean, when you're that popular of a church pastor, you're kind of in this inner circle of, church pastors. And one thing he kind of, I don't know, he outed some people without naming names by saying essentially a lot of pastors of large Christian organizations actually believe in this doctrine of universal salvation, but they don't dare step into it from the pulpit because it would ruin them. It would ruin their careers, and that's how they feed their family. Like, well, maybe they're super well off and they don't necessarily need to worry about taking a pay cut, but some of them, they don't make a ton of money and they'll lose their job. It's their career if they start alluding to this heresy, which is actually not a heresy. Well, anyway, there you have it. That's what I got for you today on episode 1 of A Case for Christian Universalism. I have a lot more coming. I have a lot more books. I have a lot more to say. I'm actually planning to read various tidbits out of a lot of these books. But yeah, hang out with me. Drop a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know when the next video comes out. I know I have a habit of leaving a few weeks in between videos. I'm going to make my best effort or best attempt at not doing that going forward. It is what it is. I got a busy life. I run a business. I got a family. So whatever. Hit a notification bell because I don't have a scheduled system of, when I release my videos. So anyway, yeah. Thanks for checking out the video. Appreciate y'all. Drop a comment and taste and see that the Lord is good. Peace.